that we are halfway through or getting close to halfway through the month of June 2000 and of course 26. It's June the 13th, and I am so glad to be with you today. I have a very special shout out to all those wonderful people who make every day ordinary just seem a little bit better and a little bit easier. I'm talking about the people who, for example, will hold the elevator while you are getting ready to enter and also go to another, part of the building. Those kind of people are very, very special. What we're talking about today is a simple thing called courtesy. That's right. People who are courteous, people who are kind, people who go out of their way to do something, just kind of special. The individual who decides, instead of leaving their grocery cart right there where they park, they actually go and return the grocery cart to either where they found it, in that special place where the people have been assigned to do that. One of the things that I often see when I go to a major store is some person who's been given the responsibility of, putting the grocery carts and bringing them back into the store. And it's a big job. And yet, when somebody just returns that grocery cart, it makes their job a little bit easier. That person who holds the elevator, who returns the grocery cart, you actually make the day for someone else just a little bit easier. And I want to thank you for doing that. I want to thank those people who will wave at somebody in traffic. I live in a rural area. And quite often, what will happen is I'll be driving my school bus or just driving, and somebody will wave to me and, basically feel, hey, thank you for acknowledging me that day. Because, life can be very lonely. Life can be very complicated. Life can be very confusing and chaotic. And when somebody does an act of kindness, it just makes not only their day, but your day as well, because you remember something. It's called courtesy. And it almost seems these days that someone being courteous is actually lost. I was listening to a fella on social media who was just making that point the other day when he said, he says, I grew up in a time period where our parents said, let's do the little things for others. And, like holding a door open for somebody, like a young lady or even another individual. That says he happened to do that one day or just the other day. He says, I held the door open, not only for a young lady who said thank you, but also he saw another gentleman coming in behind. And basically, he held the door open for him. And the other gentleman just breezed through without saying one single thing, just walked through. And he says, I couldn't help but think to myself, you know, he says, I wasn't looking for a thank you. He says, I wasn't looking for, anything like that. But he said the guy had his eyes glued on his phone and he was, basically looking at something at his phone and just breezed through and didn't even, think twice about thanking me. And he said to himself, maybe this guy feels entitled. He says, I wasn't trying to make a judgment on him, and we should never make judgments on people. But he says, I began to think that just maybe this guy was that type of individual who felt he was entitled, that he deserved to have the door open. Or maybe he was distracted by what he was doing with his phone. He says, either way, he says, I felt just kind of sad for that fella because he couldn't simply acknowledge and thank me for, this little act of kindness. But, I want to thank the people who, just make the days ordinary, like maybe speaking gently and kindly to a cashier or to someone who is, serving you in a restaurant. I often see the difference. In fact, it's kind of interesting that when I'm dropping off this one particular young lady on my bus, every single time she says, thank you. She says, thank you for driving me. And I think to myself, her parents are raising her right. She's a grade 7 student. She's, 13 years old. But every time she gets off the bus, she says, thank you. And it's interesting. It's just that little thank you. And I'm thinking to myself, that girl is going to go someplace. Why? Because she's learned something. She is a rarity in today because a lot of our young people are not that way. But her parents have taught her, or somewhere along the lines, she has learned a common thing called courtesy. And she's just thanking her bus driver for, taking her to her location. And I thought to myself, that's wonderful. But, when you and I speak kindly to a cashier, especially if she's done a great job, but even speaking kind to her, even when she's not doing such a great job, or speaking kindly to a waitress or to a server in a restaurant or someplace along that line, it really brightens up their day. I had this one fellow whose name is Jim. Jim was a native guy, and I loved watching Jim operate because he was a man who made the waitresses and the servers in restaurants feel very, very special. He spoke kindly to them. He complimented them. He said he appreciated what they were doing. And I thought to myself, I love seeing that happen because I remember this one waitress who went to our church and she said the worst people were the Sunday crowd, the people who had come from the church and then went into the restaurant and were snarky and were, basically rude. And I thought to myself, that is a terrible indictment about, against the church people. So I remember the following Sunday, she was working that Sunday, and I had a little conversation with my congregation. I said, when you go to the restaurant today, if you happen to go, I said, would you please treat the waitress and the server in a right manner? It's part of your testimony. And it was sad that I had to address that particular situation with our congregation. And I know, and I spoke at one of our ministerial meetings about that. And I remember several of the pastors said, you know what? Next Sunday, I'm going to talk about that with my congregation. And I discovered that many of them did. And it did change the atmosphere when it came to the church crowd, because all of a sudden, the waitress that was in my church said, something changed last Sunday. She says a lot of those people were not so snarky. They weren't so entitled. They weren't so demanding. And, it's very, very wonderful when a waitress or a server, even though they are doing a menial job, they are doing the best they can. And maybe the meal isn't up to your standards, but that's not their fault. It may be the fault of the cook or, what's going on in the back area. But always treat people with respect, people with courtesy. It really is a reflection of who you are, and it's a reflection of how you feel about people around you. If you're, snarky, if you're unkind, it reflects in how you present yourself. When you are courteous, when you are kind, it really changes the situation around. So I want to thank those people who, of course, also as well, check on people quietly. When was the last time you checked on someone? It was interesting. Yesterday, I made a decision that I was going to call one of my old parishioners, whose name was Donna, and she picked up the phone, and I just, it was a 5 minute conversation. I hadn't talked to her for a while, and I wasn't doing it so I could use this as an example today. But I spoke to Donna and I asked her how her family was doing, how she was feeling. And I did it because she was a friend. I did it because this was a lady that I had spent 15 years of my life being connected, not only with her, but with her husband, Tyson, who has gone to glory. He was one of the most incredible, kindest men that you ever met. In fact, everyone in the city of where I was serving as a pastor spoke highly of Tyson. I had the privilege of doing his funeral. And it was interesting that everybody who knew Tyson knew he was a special kind of guy. And his wife, Donna, was a special kind of lady. And so it was a privilege to be able to talk to her, to be able to share, what was going on in her world, and have a word of prayer with her. It was a wonderful conversation. It's okay to check on people quietly. I didn't do it so that I could broadcast today, but it was just a simple act of kindness. When was the last time you sent somebody an email, or maybe text them, or even call them, or even do an in person visit? It just changes someone's day when they know that someone cares. One of the things that I noticed, especially with people who are older and people who find themselves in old folks' home, many of them are very lonely. And some of them have said, I don't understand why my family doesn't visit me. It seems that nobody cares. And, checking on somebody, looking, you know, in on someone, it's not much of an effort, but it could mean so much to someone else. So, for those type of people who make life easier, I just want to thank you. I want to say how much I appreciate you. I really am so grateful that you are out there. And I want to encourage you to do the same. Yes, return that grocery cart. Hold the elevator. Hold the door open. Speak kindly and gently today to a cashier. You know, be nice next time you go through the McDonald's drive-through or when you sit down at a restaurant, and just be kind and courteous to someone else. It could actually change the course of their day. It could make them feel special, make them feel loved, make them feel appreciated. It doesn't take very much effort, but it could really change someone's day and disposition. Who knows? You may change someone's life even that way as well. I love this one story where there was an individual who was working in a retail job, and someone had said to them, you really are a very nice person. And I think that you could really, go some places. And that one act of kindness changed his whole view on the retail market. And he basically made it his goal in life to, when he took charge of a store, He actually instructed every one of his, employees to be kind and courteous. And you know what happened? It actually became a company policy. And as he acquired more stores, that whole philosophy just became a part of that particular store's, policy. Always be kind to the customer. And he also discovered that that kindness returned when it came to customers dealing with the store. They felt that they were appreciated. They felt that the store really did care about what was going on in that person's life. And it was amazing how it became a store policy and also a policy of that country. It doesn't take much effort to be courteous. It doesn't take much effort to be kind. And in fact, I love how one person put it. They said this: let's be, of course, let's reduce our carbon footprint. You say, what do you mean? Well, it takes more muscles in your mouth to frown than it does to make a smile. So let's be energy efficient and let's reduce our carbon footprint by smiling more and frowning less. I want to thank all the people that do these little kind things. You may not change the whole world, but I want to remind you today that you changed the room and the atmosphere of where you are and where you are in that moment. Wherever you find yourself, that act of kindness, that smile, that little gesture can mean so much to someone, especially when maybe they're not having the best day. Maybe they're not, they feeling overwhelmed or stressed. And just that one act of kindness can flip the switch on that day. And it can also be an example to them because you know what? Whether you know it or not, a lot of people are imitators. And when they see acts of kindness and courtesy and love, you know what? They may say to themselves, I want to make that part of my lifestyle. And the more people that do that, the better this world is going to be. That's my thought. So I know that courtesy almost seems in short supply, but let's not us be the person who makes it in short supply. In fact, let's allow kindness and courtesy and, being that individual that does those things, let's make it in more and more, not in short supply but in long supply. My name is Robert Dean Steele. I want to thank you so much for spending time with me, and I want to thank you as well, all people who have subscribed to my YouTube channel. Thank you for doing that. And also as well, if you like what you're hearing and seeing, I encourage you to press the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Also as well, check out my daily shorts every day. I do these YouTube videos. They're usually less than 1 minute long, and they all have one simple thought. So check those out as well. My name is Robert Dean Steele. You have yourself a great and godly day, and go and be kind to someone. You'll never know. You could change not only their day, but maybe even their life. Have yourself a great and godly day.